Joe, what organization are you with?
SSBF in Garden City.
What's your email?
joseph.hopkins@usc.salvationarmy.org.
Thank you. Just adding you to the listserv.
Thanks.
I think he should be on there, Dawn. He recently emailed me his membership application last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe. We can take a look at it.
He was added to the COC mailing list, but I went ahead and added him to this listserv as well.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, I do remember putting him on the COC. I just want to make sure he was on this one as well. I think everybody else is on there. We'll give everybody just 1 minute more. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. It's hard with Zoom because you can't, like, we used to be able to see the same screen we were sharing. Now we just have to trust that we're on the right screen. Everybody can see the same thing. So Joe, I did add you on here. And so now you will get the emails. They are setting up the mainstream. I think it's mainstream at KS Homeless. So we'll have an actual email so everybody can email each other. He emailed me yesterday, so I'm pretty sure that's being set up. So I think last time we did talk about, we kind of did a light SWOT analysis of what we want to do and where we want to go, and identified some things. And one of the things that came from it was a survey by the agencies of the COC, primarily about the training and desired training. One of the things that we do have a contract with KDADS for is to support SOAR training for all of the agencies or any case managers who wants to do that. They've asked us to send out an email to the entire COC, all case managers that want to, so that they can facilitate getting them SOAR certified. So I kind of wanted to poll everybody and see does anyone here have SOAR certification? Or is it something that they need within their agency? What do you do currently for anyone that needs to do a SOAR application? Joyce, did you guys go through to KDADS for that?
No, we
did
do the online certification. But if KDADS has something that's more hands-on and specific, that would be cool. Depending, of course, that gets the nice thing online is you do it in your own speed.
Yeah.
Right now with COVID the way it is, adding something structured to the calendar is a little difficult.
I think the way that Missy Bogart Hastings is proceeding right now is getting people connected to the online and assisting them with that. So I think she still wants to go in that follow that same route. I don't know that because the intent originally, just so everyone knows, is KDADS was going to hold 2 different sessions in 2 different parts of the state and then invite everybody to come and do a hands-on. So that I don't think they're even doing that at all because we were actually going to facilitate that and coordinate it. So one of the reasons that all of the training was provided is KDADS recognized we couldn't do that SOAR on hand or in-person training. And so that's where they did give us the funding to provide all of the training that we were able to offer through org code. So they allowed us to shift those funds. Joyce, are you only doing one because of the time that it takes to get through the SOAR? Or do you have other people that you'd like to do? Or you just have one that primarily does the applications, just out of curiosity? Like,
No,
I don't know what the need at the agency level is
Yeah.
for SOAR is what I'm asking.
For our population, we've been watching for the last 5 years and the last 2 years specifically. It's something our organization needs. I would like to have all my staff certified. I don't know that's realistic, but in terms of, but as of right now, the number of applications we refer out is astounding.
Yeah.
So if we had at least, my goal was to have 2 by the end of this year. That didn't happen. I think my one person might be finished by the end of the year, but for our agency, for our region, it's definitely a necessity, because we're just swamping everybody else who's around in Wichita and in El Dorado. And I'm sure that they've got their own swamps to deal with as well. So it would be a nice perk for us to be able to have in our toolbox.
So what I probably should do, and I apologize, we had to shift the training so quickly, and so I talk to Missy on a regular basis. So what I probably should do is get a more definitive explanation from her of what that SOAR looks like. I don't know if it's abbreviated. The online is, I went through it, is hindering to say the least. It's so time consuming, and you can't skip any of the videos and you can't skip any of the sections. And so it's, you have to pretty much sit and pay attention to every minute where there's no overlapping of it. So you only have one. Anybody else here? We only have 3 other agencies, but do you guys have any SOAR certification on site? Or do you guys you refer them all out currently?
In Garden, we refer them all out just
You
because
refer
we don't have it at SSBF. We've got it with Catholic Charities, but we don't have it with our service. I think there's one in Topeka and one in Wichita possibly. So it'd be beneficial to have here on this half of the state for us.
So even securing it per region, then Joe, would probably help you, and you too, Joyce, if you all weren't referring to just one particular agency, but there was more dedicated in the region for the time being.
You know,
That would help now. Sorry.
one other thing that adds to that as you talk to the regions about it is that from what I understand, it's really helpful to do that class with someone else, to have kind of a study buddy and a discussion partner. Because that's what I'm finding, the person who does it by themselves, if we had 2 people doing it at the same time, they can help each other go back and forth. That's a pro and a con at the same time. When you do it online, because you can't skip anything, it really helps you understand what you're doing and do a good job. But some of the stuff talk about, probably things we'll not ever really come across. Never know. So that's a good and a bad at the same time.
Well, my question is, so our goal, of course, is to get everyone who wants, or at least one person per agency is the goal, SOAR certified. But at what point do you need a SOAR expert? Because just getting the application completed doesn't finalize your engagement, right? You still have to have someone who knows where the issues are, how specifically they might be challenged and so forth. So what if we were, and this is long-term, this is obviously not by the end of the year for anyone. I'm not sure we're all going to accomplish anything by the end of the year, but what if we were looking at what does it take to support SOAR certification, one per agency, but then establish someone in each region who is a SOAR specialist or an overflow, who would have direct access to Missy and her staff to advocate or overcome any challenges with the applications. Because I think that's sometimes where the greatest hindrance is just not getting through the application process in itself, which is overwhelming. But then it is answering the questions. And then, when they send them back to you and say, you have to have this, would it also be beneficial to have a SOAR expert per region? I don't know if it's realistic to say per agency, because then, you're only getting a certain amount and you can't really be an expert.
Dawn, you have a question in the chat about not from being familiar with SOAR, you might take a look, just a couple minutes to say what that is about.
Let me share that. Hold on here.
Thank you.
Actually, I'll just open the link. So, and it is, I think all of the training is through SAMHSA. And it's basically Social Security qualification and benefits, Social Security and disability. I'm sorry, it's both applications, which is quite a cumbersome application process. Not only once you get the application finished, then they send you back questions and challenge some of the answers. They ask for details. It's kind of the same process that the IRS puts you through becoming a 501c3. You might answer all the questions properly, fill in all the blanks, and then they still want to go. I was going to look here real quick and see. I was trying to see how many. This is information. I'm trying to find the training itself. Oh, let's just look at the adult.
I think at one point it said something about taking 80 hours.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I literally worked on it forever and forever. I can't look without logging in. So Missy would be helping us facilitate that. So one of the things that I put on the task list for me to do is to check with Missy to see what, if that's the same, if we can bypass that online. You know, if there's something that they have, if they have made their own training, I don't know what it looks like for her. We were just going to try to, first, what we were going to try to do is coordinate a list of who has it and where, so that our agencies could refer out to everyone other than the one guy they know. And then the goal, of course, was to try to get each agency that wanted to have at least one staff member with SOAR certification. You know, I'm not opposed to trying to get where you utilize our resource with Missy to get a SOAR expert, or even if she has staff that we can use as SOAR experts, so then we have challenges back on the applications, we could go to them and overcome it maybe a little faster, speed up the process, who can also advocate. Because I know when I was with Catholic Charities, we had a person that had literally a contact that they could call and try to move the applications along a little in certain circumstances. So they had a guy. So, you know, it would be nice if we had an expert or a guy in each region that could, we wouldn't be able to use it on every application, but on those that probably, you know, needed a little more assistance or overcome or move it along a little faster. So Mel, you're with Lawrence Douglas. You guys you have kind of a siloed population. Is it something that maybe you would want to enhance as being able to do those? I mean, that's long-term financial stability.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I don't believe that anyone here is certified in that. The majority of our management team is relatively new, so.
You guys have had a lot of changes. Well, and I think you bring up a good point. To be honest, we forget that not everyone understands what SOAR is, or the benefit, or the process. So are we doing a good enough job sharing with all of the agencies that that's a resource, a long-term financial stability resource, not only with the agencies, but are we doing a good job at disseminating that information to clients and being able to look and see, you know what I mean? Are we really training ourselves to know, be able to ask the right questions? Is this client even a good candidate? We don't want to shotgun it out and apply for everybody if we don't really understand. So,
Right.
So I put both of those. So what I'll do too is we'll start here and I'll reach out to Missy and try to get some of that. In the website, and I'll put it in the chat, or actually Casey put it in the chat, and I'll put it on the document too, because I think that's important. We'll just put it right here. Oops. So that you guys, and this will be put back in the Outlook request, so you guys can open this at any time and click on it and kind of look through it. It is free. You do not have to pay for the SOAR certification. It is very hindering to do the process. I honestly worked on it forever and I still have a few sections to go. So I think that that is another resource that we need to educate, we need to share, we need to understand. So maybe even that's another great one for the FYI on Friday, is to share that. What other trainings? So Joyce, you probably are going to answer this maybe better than all of us. What other things do you have to refer out for? I mean, you're a large agency, what you're referring out for SOAR, but are there any other trainings that we could get for the agencies that would keep you from having to refer out to someone else or to another agency? You're muted. You're muted.
Got it.
There you
Thank
go. I can see you moving.
you. We do, what we do in-house, we do training on the things we train out on, we refer out on are things that are bigger than us. So
Right.
if we have somebody who is in the middle of a drug and alcohol problem, chemical dependency, we refer to treatment programs. We'll refer to, I'm sorry, this caught my ear over there. I need to get my door shut. We refer to mental health services, that kind of thing. We do all of our own training. We do the trauma-informed training. We do training internally for that. Motivational training, a lot of those things that you sent out that we got the free training for. We do all of those things in-house. So getting those smaller trainings to refine skills and get motivation for ourselves, that's all what we do. We do that internally. So if we could get help with that, working directly with the customer. But one of the things that I think is lacking all around in terms of what we do is really educating landlords on our customer and how with our customers and some of the legal facts that we could give them and saying, you know, you really want to evict, but here's the real deal. You might want to look at this before you make that decision. Developing those relationships with landlords, particularly the landlords that have one bad experience and assume everybody else we refer is going to be the same way. And there's been some trainings on how to do that, but they're more about you need to do it, not actually here's a potential conversation that you could have. The meat and the potatoes. We know it needs to be done. We do as good a job as we can, but the reality is in rural areas, you can't afford to lose a landlord.
Right. Well, and I think that's twofold. So Joyce, I think that's absolutely valid. And that's come up in some other groups. It's twofold. We need to, one, train our landlords not on what they're obligated to do legally, but what's the benefit to work with us, not the client. And just because you have one bad client doesn't mean that there's not remedies put in place or assurances or safeguard.
Yeah. We started doing something that's helped in one of our communities. When we have a landlord really understands what we're doing, and I think these are things that can be talked about in this kind of a training session, is we'll ask that landlord, because there's all kinds of landlord associations and how to get into that is not always the easiest thing to find, but we'll ask a landlord to say, would you mind calling this person and letting him know your experience with us and kind of help us bring them into the fold, because we need those units. And
so that's a reference network within your regions, because you can do that statewide, but if you had that as a tool in a per region, right? Okay.
Yeah, if we could say, you could go to this website and see how this works across Kansas, that would be helpful. It's just, and another resource, somebody they know, usually the local references are the best. The other thing I think that helps in training is getting into the network of where low-income housing is going to be built, and getting into the network of the Section 8 programs. I know that there's all applications, but even if there was just a page say, here's how we do the application and here's the application, I'm I think that for agencies that work within their own community, that's probably very common knowledge. But when you've got 19 counties and it takes you an hour to search which Section 8 program works that county, it's just really time consuming, and then it might change and you don't know it. So it helps to be on top of those things so that you look intelligent when you're making a referral to the right place.
Well, and I'm going to agree with you, Joyce, and we're actually working on a resource network. And one of the things that we had not come across is that including those landlords or Section 8 in those resources, because, you know, we've hit all of the common food, utility, all that, DV, McKinney-Vento, all of the basics, but it didn't come across to me to think about as what another thing our agencies do need is the network, the Section 8 lists, who to contact, how to contact them, and so forth. Because especially when you're hitting so many broad counties, I mean, not everybody is in that many counties, but who is going to come on that's in those counties that would be able to use that resource. So I do believe that should be added to the resource list, because there's nothing I can think of that shouldn't be added to the resource list, because we can't determine what the need might or might not be going down the road, you know, and especially when I know Lawrence Douglas, Mel, you guys are working with the Project Able. You kind of got it dumped in your lap, all of their clients, and you're working with, I think, quite a few of them trying to get them Section 8. So, you know, you never know when the circumstances are going to change dramatically, and you should have that resource. Your staff happen to know that and know who to contact, but that's probably not the experience for all agencies across the state, Joyce, and I think you're right. And I think that sharing resources is probably important too. So we can build it. We have it split between our two HMIS supports, system admins, but what do we have in place to take information as we get it from you? You know what I mean? Once you cross that Section 8 list or that landlord group, how can we get it? And it is going to be broken down by regions. You'll see that reflected on the website, but I think that's definitely something for them to be taking into account.
One of the other things I think that would be help, and I don't want to monopolize. I apologize, so you can tell me to shut up anytime. One of the other things that I think that we could use training on, because I don't think this is consistent, and I don't think we always know, for our agency only, I don't think we always know what the HUD regulation is. But that's when we find someone who's eligible in our county, but they want to move to a different county and it's way too far for us to case manage. Now, I understand we can let the customer select their housing, but the reality is, if they're eligible in Augusta and they need to move to Dodge City, I can't case manage that and make it happen.
Right.
So how to hand off a customer who, and I don't even know, do they have to be eligible in Dodge City for Dodge City to take them in their COC program? That gets a little kind of confusing, and I don't know that anybody really knows too much about the answer.
We are already working on, actually, it's an inter COC transfer, because HUD does want us to. So the regulation as it is let's say you transfer to a county that you're not in your COC. So you have two options. We would have to have a process in place to transfer them. So you would still do the VIC spit out, you'd still qualify them. They would still be referred to that program or to that. We're going to hopefully at some point have a statewide COC coordinated entry. So it bounce to that and they'd be referred to the other region. So two things we need to do. One, you could case manage if it was within a reasonable distance.
Right.
So it could be one county over. That would be your choice. You wouldn't have to give up the client. The housing dollars would be within. So we have to get exact specifications on how that works. And I've actually been working with Dana Buckner is the one who brought that up at the conference we were at. But we also need to have a written policy within the COC that guides that to make sure we are doing it properly. So that is something that Shanae and I have already taken on, that and the DV transfers, because it might be a similar situation where a DV client needs to go from one region to another. How do we do that? What does HUD want us to do? So that is coming. We don't have it defined yet, but we did identify that, because you're right. That's best practice, is not to say, well, you have to stay in Dodge County. That's it, you know, period. And what in some clients, we had one that we were, there was some case management being done where he had a guardianship in one county, so he had to stay in that county and couldn't, we had housing in other places for him, but he couldn't leave because of that. So the case management that has to follow through with that. So I agree. Both of those transfer plans, we are trying to draft and decide, because HUD tells you to do it. It's not necessarily clear on how to do it, how that works. Do you have to qualify them? Do you redo the VIs for that? We're also looking at, in Lawrence Douglas, you guys have kind of forced us to also look at what happens when they're being transferred from one PSH to another. Because you guys, so Lawrence Douglas took on a huge grant to house Project Able, permanent supportive housing. The problem is now they're housed with private grant funding, but they were PSH. So can we transfer them from a PSH to a PSH? Are they technically still PSH? So what we want to do is try to offset that and not have that happen again. Hopefully that situation wouldn't happen, but what happens when, they can't serve that many clients anymore, or, they need to transfer some to another PSH? What is the guidance? We don't have that answer yet, but Shanae and I are both diligently working on what does that look like? What does, most of your clients, Mel, are going to end up in Section 8. We're trying to get some amendments done so that they could take them on, but it should have been offset from the beginning. It would have been better for you guys and Project Able and the COC had we had those in place. So it's a live and learn, but I agree, Joyce, we need to have those parameters set now. We need to have education set now. I think it enhances the case management. So as soon as we have, it's not us decide what it looks like. We need to know what HUD tells us to do in those situations. So, but I think that's a very valid point. And it's, as the communication opens up between all of the agencies, I feel like a lot more agencies are coming to the table and saying, hey, we need training and so forth. Joyce, what did you think about the org code training? Because you already do the org code training
No, I did not. I did not yet. Coming up.
Oh, okay.
I messed up my registration. I forgot to hit a final.
I forgot that.
So
there will be a survey sent out the first or second week of December. I am sitting in on all of them. I found them useful. I just want to see what other, I don't want to continue working and doing training. What I want is a list of training that I can solicit for everybody. That just came across our laps. We were able to negotiate a good deal and shift our funding quickly. But I don't want to continue offering the same funding. And that's part of why I'm polling is SOAR obviously is important. It's hindering. So I think our question is that, do we get SOARs? How can we get SOAR quickly? How can we get that support? Because it is some ridiculous. And I forgot it was adult and child. So you have two different application processes. Yeah. So I did put that on my note and my task list to follow up with Missy and see if we can expedite the process any. And then that information, we're working together on sharing it with the COC. What other training, guys? Anything that I would really like to start looking at and thinking mainstream benefits, but also thinking agency support. What else can we get out there? And this will come on the survey too, to the entire COC that engaged in the trainings. I know we're going to do DV. The DV work group is going to do, I'm going to be sending them out a poll sometime in November. They're going to be doing a DV training for the whole COC, especially for agencies. I think it's important, and they made a great point. We all think, so DV thinks they know what PSH is, and PSH agencies think they really know what's done within the DV, but I think that it's important that we start sharing with each other, qualifications for each, what supportive services look like, and so forth, what different services each agency has and is able to do, just to tighten up that understanding. And I think that will help us as we go forward. DV agencies will be now part of the coordinated entry process with deaggregate data and anonymous identifiers. But I think it does help us know when to get a client engaged in DV, even if they're not necessarily, they've identified as DV, but what other supportive services that might be more appropriate for a DV provider, or sometimes when we can just get them in, what to look for to get them into PSH to get them housed, what is the thing. So DV, I will not be doing that. DV agency, Shirley Fessler, and a few of the agencies have agreed to work together. And then what we'll do is we're going to be soliciting, Joyce, honestly, I was looking for some of my CAP agencies to do some training. I think there needs to be some distinguishing training between what a community action agency is versus an agency, some of our other grantees, an ESG agency, so forth, because I think the best education is going to become from pulling our resources and educating each other. We can give you guidelines all day long, but the reality is, how can we best case manage? And that's why I think that this is applicable here. Is so that DV, I'm sending out a Survey Monkey, so anybody who's on that will get that as well on when we can do that training, and it'll just be available COC once a month. One representation from our COC will be giving a training to all of the COC. It'll just be a share, is what it is. Not formal how you do it, but so any other trainings today that you guys can think of, or things that I could facilitate to getting a resource to train? One of the other things that I know Casey Brown has brought up, Joyce, and advocated on is training for law enforcement about landlord tenants. We had a situation
Perfect.
here. Yeah, we had a situation in Lawrence a few weeks ago where the landlord decided that he was going to go physically take the tenants out. They were working with one of our Lawrence agencies. And so he brought a police officer, and the police officer basically told the tenants they needed to just get out. And basically implied, they did not say there was an eviction, but the tenant had been served with a 3-day notice. The police took it upon them to let the tenant know that that was an eviction. And unfortunately, they can't do that. So we were able to intervene and kind of educate both parties in a very kind way. But I think that probably happens a lot more often than not, is we're all scared of the police. So if they show up and say, get out, and a lot of the feedback I've been getting, and you guys can tell me best, is people are getting 3-day notices and leaving without an eviction, which makes it hard to get them housed again, because then they've lost the documentation they need, even though they're technically homeless. So Casey had been spearheading some ideas as a former police officer. He was spearheading some ideas for how to engage, and police departments don't want to hear from us, but how to engage them in a way that they'll listen about tenant rights.
I think, am I on mute? Can you hear me?
No, you're muted. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay, I think there's one other group that you need to put in there, and that's those hotel motels that have extended stay that rent to very low income individuals. We had a hotel owner in Arc City on Thursday cut off the electricity to 41 units, and 5 of them are on oxygen. And the way they found out that electricity was off, their oxygen machines stopped. So we're in the middle of a big, and then it's been a giant nightmare. We've gotten 12 of them into hotels. We got the utilities back on, but we've got 41 people too. And I was going to ask you about this when you call me later, so I won't go into a lot more detail. So basically, we got 41 families, individuals and families to relocate.
Wow.
In a place, if we can find 5 units open, I'll be amazed. So, but I was going to ask you about that. Maybe we could hang on after one of those other meetings, because I just have a question about the documentation there.
Yeah, actually, if you want to hang on after DV,
Yeah.
because I have back-to-back, I have this and then another one and then DV, but if you want to hang on after DV, let's talk through that, because I think that does, in this current climate, let's talk that out. How many of our agencies are putting people up in hotels and motels? So legally, I wouldn't even know that answer or begin to know that answer. A hotel motel is not a written agreement. It is, is it under squatters' rights if they don't leave? Does it take a legal action? So we not only need to educate those who we contract with in the motel, hotel, or, you know, pay, I should say, because we're doing that more and more because we don't have resources.
And
But I think,
we have a lot of customers live in hotels in our areas, especially those on any kind of regular Social Security payment, a lower Social
Sure.
Security payment, because they can usually live in a hotel for $300 or $400 a month with no utility bills. So all they're doing is buying food. So those landlords, those
for
hotels,
landlords,
example, in this case, this in my opinion, this motel should have been condemned years ago. It is infested with rats and mice and cockroaches. We couldn't go in the rooms. There are holes in the roof, there are holes in the floor, and this is not new. These things have happened over the last umpteen years, but they're not getting any they're not getting the legal input that needs to be to get shut down. And part of it is because they don't know where they're going to put 41 people. So
yeah. Well, and unfortunately,
it's about maintaining their units.
right. Well, and I think it is, when can we get involved? Because how are they paying? Were they all, you said they're all Social Security. So, you know, that's technically homeless, right? Because it's not habitable for a human, or I can never remember that sentence, but
That's what I was going to ask you about.
yeah. So technically, no, if it is not, it is not, and they would qualify under one of the classifications of homeless. So, but when do we have that right? And but I think it leads to a bigger picture, Joyce, is as we're depending on these extended stay. And I actually, it's funny because when I worked in Johnson County, they always say, well, we don't really have low income. It's a kind of a not my backyard thing. And so I literally went and did a count of a 3-mile stretch of 35, Interstate 35 going to Kansas City. And there are literally like 29 extended stays. And so one of the things I did, I'd go speak to the school district, was I went in and talked to an extended stay manager and said, how many of your tenants are night by night? They're like, oh, these people, some of these people have been here 6 or 7 years. To me, that does make it a landlord situation. And it is, because it's just a one price per week, call it done. They don't have to do any maintenance. They have support and so forth. And in a place like Johnson County, and I don't know that any of our other counties are really excluded from this mentality, when low income housing is being minimized, then that's the only alternative for safe, affordable housing. And, you know, not necessarily your situation, but it is where a lot of turning, and I see a lot of agencies turning to that as a solution as well, because they can't get somebody housed. There's just simply not housing. So we probably do need to develop some training, not necessarily training, but some guidelines to follow, some things to check, some advocacy things to take into consideration, right? Because, you know,
advocacy especially because I'm sure that there are other kind of legal requirements to maintaining a hotel motel situation. But you're right, even with our folks that we're dealing with now, we have some hotels that will give us a discount because we're a nonprofit in what we're doing, and we have some who's going to charge full price. And when you're looking at $100 a night, that's just if you get something decent. It's just so expensive, and you might have to keep them up in a hotel for 2 months before you find them a unit. And I don't know anybody who's got that kind of money.
well, Joyce, and so that speaks to the power of the COC, right? What can we as a collective membership do to negotiate with certain hotels? So can we force their hand to negotiate with us? Because we're going to go over here to Holiday Inn Express and say on a national level, you will be our preferred provider if you give us this statewide cost, right? Then that you're leveraging membership. And I don't know how many of those would exist, but by doing that by proxy, you would force those who are not on that national to compete, because don't let them tell you they're not making money at that, especially during COVID. They're taking advantage because you don't have that power, but we do as a membership, and I say we meaning the COC, how can we start leveraging that membership on a statewide level with, you know, and I actually met with Harvesters, and I'm going to meet with Kansas Food Bank. How can I leverage us as a membership to get more food? We're working on literally getting some of the food deserts delivered to by harvesters for commodities. What they said to me is tell us where, when, and how many people will come. You tell us where, we'll come free of charge. So, you know, but that's leveraging our membership, right? So if we can do it for food, why can't we do it for hotels? Why can't we do it for long-term stay? Why can't we even do it for property owners? I mean, you know, there's probably not statewide property owners, but there are some large property owners. I only can speak to those in Johnson County because that's what I know, but I know that there's property owners that own different divisions statewide, you know, and say, hey, those are the ones you could educate one time and be done. So I think all of those are valuable tools, and that's a valuable change in mindset about what does education within our COC look like, within our membership look like. And I think, Joyce, that those are great things that when we do a training, I don't want to say a training, it's more of a town hall, but those are things that we could make the topic, and everybody, the whole point of those, the DV talking, is a two-way conversation so we can ask questions. They can educate us. I don't know what all a DV agency does. I'm not a DV agency. But so I think, Joyce, that's even a great thing to talk about in one of those, the town hall type of meetings is, what do you do with your extended stay? Who are you doing your extended stay? And that's where getting everybody at the table at one time. Not that we don't do that on a COC meeting, but when you're looking at it as a training, you feel more entitled to ask and say, well, how are you negotiating those? What do you say to them? How do you do your landlord? And that's where we can share experience. So I have to check. I honestly don't know on the extended stay what the law says, but I happen to know how to look it up and how to find out. So it's on the list. It's on your list. You made it to the list a few times.
We were fortunate enough to have a police officer say, you are going to, and you know, he was very forceful and very respected in the community. So utilities are back on, but the place, I mean, we're still dealing with it.
Gosh, I just can't even imagine. That's, and unfortunately, I think that's happening more often than not. You know. So if you want, Joyce, we can chat. I'm so sorry. I literally have not stopped since 9 this morning with the back-to-back video. But if you want to stay on after the DV call, I'm more than glad to talk and check your Dropbox. So anybody else? So Tucker, glad to see you here. What we're talking about is just trying to find some opportunities for training. We talked about SOAR certification. Do you guys have anyone SOAR certified?
Yeah, we have 4 SOAR certified people.
Fabulous.
Just so you know, SOAR certification requires that they do so many SOAR cases per year to maintain that certification. And a lot of people, when it first started here in Kansas, didn't realize that. And
I didn't realize that.
yeah, so it's a good thing to do, but they do need to engage in that SOAR process, and that can take some time. So if people aren't prepared for that, then it may not be worth doing that.
Well, and I think that's part of the conversation I need to have with Missy too, because she's the one that really wants it, one for agency.
I'd
But
love to see that.
yeah, well, and I would love to see that too. And that's why I think we need to survey the agencies and say, how many are you really having? Is it worth making someone go through all that work? Joyce, obviously you're going to have that amount, you know, the volume. And Tucker, you guys obviously do too. But maybe for the agencies who aren't, we partner them with someone who does. Because what we don't want to happen is, Joyce, you get a SOAR person, and Tucker, you have SOAR people. Then all the agencies just bombard you because they happen to know it. Maybe we try to partner agencies where one agency says we'll take it on, the other says we'll partner, you know, 2 or 3 agencies. Right. That way you're not bombarded all the time because of your volume. And by partnering,
that's the way it is right now.
It's exactly the way it is. And that's why we need to have a discussion about how many agencies, you know, maybe we discuss with the agencies who have SOAR certified staff, who are you getting the referrals from, and how can we match a staff member from one of those to take on some of them, because nobody has spare case management time anymore. It was fine when things were normal,
Yeah.
we're not gonna hit normal. We haven't hit the peak. So
Right.
what's gonna happen to those those SOAR applications when you physically cannot take them on? So even if we don't require, not require, but what we don't encourage every agency to take on one, we need to be strategic about who we ask to take it on, because they need to also agree, we're gonna do it, but we're gonna take referrals from 3 different agencies if we take it on, or we 2, I don't know what it looks like. I'm just saying, maybe that we have a conversation about SOAR certification and I think before we start that, we need to talk to agencies and see what the need is.
Yeah, I think setting up a baseline is a great idea. Seeing who's doing the apps and where they're coming from, and then looking to those folks making those referrals to their capacity, et cetera. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think, Joyce, what I'm gonna take that and run with it. I think what we do is send a COC email out and ask the agencies, to the agencies, I should say, and ask them who has SOAR funding. Do you receive, just 5 questions. Do you receive referral, or not SOAR funding, SOAR training staff? How many applications do you do? How many do you do for other agencies? Do you take referrals? Keep it real basic, but then I think it kind of gives us an idea who to start asking. So, my question to you would be, Tucker, who gives you the most amount of referrals? If an agency's only giving you 1 a year, I'm not gonna, go after them. But if you have a consistent agency who's really flooding yours, you know what I mean? And you don't have to answer. I'm just saying those would be the questions I would solicit after we got that information. And I think that helps us, even if we don't do it on a shotgun level everywhere, we start looking at who's inundating you once you have it, and how can we support them?
For the most part, most of our referrals are from within Burt Nash
You-
clients.
You have that volume because
Yeah.
you do outreach, right?
Right, but we work with people all over the place. Does the shelter still? I don't think they still have the disability professionals that come and meet people regularly. Do you guys still do that there, Mel?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Yeah, there used to be an organization that was kind of positioned at the shelter like once a week they would be there. But it was not good because they would take on anybody's case, and it was just one of those, like, they get your information and then they throw it at the wall and hopefully something stuck kind of thing. We ended up having to redo a whole bunch of people's applications. Now the shelter's got much smaller population there now. But I think it would be great to get to, I'd love to see a SOAR worker up there at LCS. There's so much that can be done. And the truth is the reason why SOAR works so well is that it's such a complicated process that if you're really mentally disabled, you can't do it.
Right.
And you need someone to get you through that. And lawyers will milk it as long as they can because they're getting paid.
They're taking a bigger chunk of it. Yeah.
They get a bigger chunk. Or we do what disability professionals did, where they just grabbed everybody, filled out the paperwork and threw it at the courts, and hopefully one of them got through and they got paid. SOAR works really fast, and it's a very tried and true system. It's great. The training is fantastic for it, but in order to remain certified, you do have to do so many a year. And that's all tracked through the OATS system.
And that's what Missy was going to pull is I was going to try to solicit who, and then she was going to try, we were going to compare because she was going to pull, because OATS will tell her who we have that has the certification and so forth. I was not aware that you had to be constantly certified, but what if we do? I mean, I do think that somehow we need to establish one centralized SOAR person that is high level.
We used to have one here. We used to have a regional coordinator for SOAR. And then when they left their position, they just never filled it. The state never filled it. And they just kept assuming that the next highest person at Burt Nash would be the SOAR liaison. And then it came down to it and they were like, I don't want to be SOAR liaison. That's not the job that I'm taking on. I'm a SOAR worker.
Well, and it's a very specific skill set. You can't just put
Right.
somebody in it.
The
To
two-
be that
the two
liaison,
jobs
you have to have-
different skills. that they
Yeah,
require.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what that does, and we'll wrap up, guys, is I think what that does do is give me some direction and where we start with Missy. Missy is going to support anything we ask of her. She's already pretty much given me a blank check to make SOAR happen and SOAR training. We didn't have a real definition of what that looked like for us. Of course, her goal is to get one per agency, but is that a realistic goal? We don't know. So,
I really do think it is. I think it's not that bad.
well, and I think what we do is we need to start that survey first and say, who has it? How many referrals? How many do you do? And then look at it realistically and it's a simple question. Do you want a SOAR? Would it benefit you to have a SOAR certified staff? And what can we do, Joyce, and maybe there's a way we can get the SOAR trainings free, but maybe we can find a way to work out some kind of stipend if they get, I don't know what KDAD's looking at for it, but I'm going to definitely follow up with Missy. We've already been working on it. We just hadn't gotten into the weeds yet. So I'll do that and hopefully have that before the next meeting, at least give us some guidance. And I'm sure I could talk Missy into coming and talking about it with you guys and brainstorming. She would absolutely love it. She's very much, our relationship with KDADS has changed dramatically. She's very much engaged in supporting the COC. So, maybe I'll run that by her and say, would you be willing to come and chat with the Mainstream Benefits Committee about because she can tell you better than what I can, what they're willing to do to support our efforts. What, if that certification can be bypassed, or if they have a liaison in-house at KDADS that we can start referring to. I don't have those answers, but let me talk to Missy and then I'll get back with you guys at the next meeting and then we'll go from there. Okay, anything else, guys?
I
Joyce?
have one more thing I put in the chat box. I wanted to
sorry.
tell you about Aunt Bertha. Has anybody heard of this yet? Okay. The state DCF has agreed to contract to get a program for resources. It's kind of like IRIS, if you've heard of IRIS, but it's called Aunt Bertha. I don't know why. It's just kind of crazy. But they're going to be allowing anybody to access this. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because nobody wants to reinvent the wheel. This is a really expensive software program that they're bringing in. And it puts the way it's been described to me, it puts 211 to shame. It's
wow.
like 211 has on the internet, on their website. That's like kindergarten compared to this. It's going to have a lot of interaction. It won't allow you to make referrals back and forth like IRIS can.
Right.
IRIS can let you make referrals back and forth if you choose that level of participation. But this is going to have just almost any kind of resource and every resource you can have. And DCF is paying for it for the state of Kansas. So that's something we might want to keep our eyes and ears on. And right now it's being referred to as Aunt Bertha. I don't know why.
I have to check into it for sure because I think that's valuable. And Joyce, just so you know, the CAP information is going to go out on our blog and on our Facebook. So you guys are going to start seeing a lot of activity around our social media. We do have a social media plan. And so we've been getting a few more hits on the website each week. It's up to like 80 a week, which is fabulous considering we've never really had activity. So that we're actually starting what we want to do is engage. People get all their information through social media. So why not put the CAP information out and hopefully that'll get shared and go back and forth. So we did take that. And I don't know, I for some reason had read something originally that said it ended the 15th, but it's still on KHRC's website. So it's continuing.
I think the 15th was the initial deadline for certain landlords to go ahead and get their stuff in.
Gotcha.
But you don't have to worry about it. And there's a few things that people who don't know, if they're not working with that project, if you have a landlord and a tenant go in and they don't have a vendor ID number, as long as they've submitted for one, that's fine. That application will not get messed up as incomplete, because I understand you have an incomplete application, you literally go in the bottom of the line and may not ever get touched again. So people.
Well, and one of the things that someone asked me about is if you didn't have an email or the vendor ID, the client can't submit the application either, right?
That's correct. It's a joint application. The landlord has to go in and fill out his information to get the vendor ID and agree to the stipulations. Then they go in and they both do the application
Okay.
because both of them have to sign it. So I don't think I
Okay.
can do it simultaneously, but one thing that can be missed is if they don't have their vendor ID number yet, they can leave that blank. It'll get filled in later.
Okay, so the client can leave it blank. They
Mhm.
just still have to put the email in, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't overly familiar and someone asked me, I'm like,
Yeah.
I referred them to Kansas Housing because I wasn't sure, but that is helpful. But those are helpful things that we need to be putting on social media or in our FYI and sharing. You know, it's almost like we need a message board for the COC as a chat. And I know that sounds silly, but I think little things like that do matter. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that you forwarded that. I have to hop off for another call, guys, but we are doing the DV today at 3 p.m. It probably won't be overly long, but I want to stay on track with at least meeting, touching base, and staying on track. So I know some of you guys are, some aren't, but just to let you know, I had a few people jump on at 10 a.m. Even though I moved it on the calendar, I forgot to change the link that I sent, so I apologize. But if not, just join the calendar at 3 p.m. for the DV. And Joyce, we'll talk after that. All right, bye guys. Have a good week. Bye.